In 1882, Arizona Territory, a starving Apache warrior named Takoda, cast out from his tribe and dying in the desert, stumbles into a frontier town's livestock auction with his last silver dollar. There he encounters a massive scarred mule that no one wants, a beast so wild and broken that even seasoned ranchers fear it. What begins as a desperate bid for survival becomes an extraordinary bond between two outcasts that will challenge everything the town believes about redemption, prejudice, and the true meaning of family. The auctioneer's hammer came down hard, but not as hard as the silence that followed. In the dusty corner of the Tombstone livestock auction, a skeletal Apache warrior stood beside a monstrous mule that towered over him like death itself. The crowd gasped, not because an Indian had won the bid, but because the mule's eyes had begun to glow with an otherworldly golden light the moment the Apache's trembling hand touched its scarred flank. "Lord have mercy," whispered old Pete, the town drunk. "That ain't no ordinary mule." He was right. But then again, Takoda was no ordinary Apache. The morning had started differently. 12 hours before that fateful moment, Takoda had been crawling, literally crawling across the scorched earth outside Tombstone, his lips cracked like dried leather, his stomach so empty it had stopped hurting 3 days ago. The sun above was a merciless eye watching him die with the same indifference it had shown his people for centuries. His name meant friend to all in his native tongue, but friendship had become a luxury he could no longer afford. Cast out from his tribe for refusing to join the last raids against the white settlements, raids he knew would only bring more death to his people, Takoda had wandered alone for 2 moons. His crime, choosing peace in a world that demanded war. The irony wasn't lost on him. Here he was, dying of starvation because he'd refused to steal food from innocent families. His father, the great warrior Nayashia, would have called him weak. Perhaps he was right. A dust devil danced in the distance, and for a moment, Takoda thought he saw his grandmother's face in the swirling sand. "The spirits test those they wish to elevate," her voice whispered on the wind. "Your greatest treasure will come when you have nothing left to give." Hallucinations, that's all they were. The dead don't speak to outcasts. But then he heard it, the distant sound of voices, livestock and life. Using the last reserves of his strength, Takoda pulled himself to the top of a small ridge. Below, the town of Tombstone sprawled like a wound on the earth, and at its edge, a large gathering of people surrounded wooden pens filled with horses, cattle, and mules. An auction. Takoda's hand went to his belt, where a single silver dollar rested, his last possession, given to him by a dying Mexican trader he'd tried to save from bandits a week ago. The man had pressed it into his palm with his final breath, whispering, "Para tu destino," for your destiny. He'd planned to buy food with it, if he ever found civilization. But as Takoda stumbled down the hillside toward the auction, something else pulled at him. Not hunger, something deeper. A calling he couldn't name. The crowd parted as he approached, not out of respect but from disgust. Women pulled their children closer. Men's hands drifted to their pistols. He was a walking corpse, an Apache corpse, which made him doubly unwelcome in a town still raw from the Apache wars. "Get out of here, redskin," growled a burly rancher named Hayes, his breath reeking of whiskey despite the early hour. "This auction's for civilized folk." Takoda didn't respond. He couldn't. His throat was too dry for words. Instead, he simply stood at the edge of the crowd, swaying slightly, his dark eyes scanning the animals in the pens. That's when he saw it. In the farthest pen, separated from all other animals, stood a mule unlike anything he'd ever seen. It was massive, at least 18 hands high, with a coat so black it seemed to absorb the sunlight. Scars crisscrossed its body like a map of violence. One ear was half torn off. Its ribs showed through its hide, and chains, actual chains, not rope, bound its legs. But it was the mule's eyes that stopped Takoda's heart. They were intelligent, almost human, in their depth, and filled with a rage and sorrow that Takoda recognized. He saw himself in those eyes. He saw every Apache who'd been broken by the white man's world. He saw every creature that had been deemed worthless and dangerous. Lot number 47, the auctioneer, a thin man named Cornelius Wexler, announced with obvious reluctance. 1 mule, age unknown, breed unknown, previous owner killed when the beast went mad and trampled him. Starting bid, $1. The crowd laughed bitterly. You'd have to pay me to take that demon, someone shouted. Killed 3 men that tried to break it, another added. Johnston was gonna shoot it, but figured he might get something for the meat and hide. That thing ain't right, old Pete slurred from his spot by the water trough. Seen it stare at the moon all night, like it's waiting for something. Mark my words, that mule's got devil in it. The auctioneer sighed. Do I hear $1? Anyone? Silence. Going once, Takoda's legs moved without his permission. His hand rose, the silver dollar glinting in the harsh sun. Going twice. I bid. Takoda rasped, his voice like sandpaper on stone. It was the first words he'd spoken in days. The crowd turned as one, shock rippling through them like a wave. An Apache, a starving, dying Apache, bidding on a killer mule with what was obviously his last dollar. Hayes burst out laughing. Let him have it. 2 demons deserve each other. Hell, I'll throw in a saddle just to watch that beast kill him. But Cornelius Wexler hesitated. Even he, pragmatic as he was, felt something wrong about this. Son, he said, addressing Takoda with surprising gentleness, that animal will kill you. It's killed 3 men already. You sure about this? Takoda nodded, never taking his eyes off the mule. The animal had gone completely still, its massive head turned toward him, studying him with an intensity that made several onlookers step back. Going 3 times, Wexler said slowly, hoping anyone would intervene. No one did. Sold. The hammer fell. The moment it did, something extraordinary happened. The mule, which had been violent and unmanageable for weeks, took a single step toward Takoda. Just 1 step, but in that movement was a question, a recognition, a possibility. Takoda approached the pen slowly, his movements careful despite his weakness. The crowd backed away, some running for cover, certain they were about to witness a brutal death. Don't be a fool, Apache, Marshal Virgil Earp called out, having arrived to see what the commotion was about. That beast is a killer. But Takoda kept walking. When he reached the pen, he did something that made even hardened cowboys gasp. He climbed inside. The mule could have killed him instantly. 1 kick from those massive hooves would have shattered his skull like an egg. Instead, it stood perfectly still, its breathing heavy, its eyes never leaving Takoda's face. Takoda raised 1 trembling hand, palm out, the way his grandmother had taught him to approach wild horses when he was a boy. I see you, he whispered in Apache. I see what they've done to you, what they've taken from you. The mule's ears flicked forward. They've broken your body, but not your spirit. They've caged you, but they haven't conquered you. His hand drew closer. I am the same. We are the same. His fingers touched the mule's scarred muscle. The world seemed to hold its breath. Then, impossibly, the mule lowered its massive head and pressed it against Takoda's chest, a gesture so gentle, so deliberate, that several women in the crowd began to cry. Mother of God, Marshal Earp muttered. But the real miracle was yet to come. As Takoda's hand rested on the mule's neck, a warmth spread through his body, not natural warmth, but something else, something that made his empty stomach stop aching, made his cracked lips heal, made strength flow back into his wasted muscles. The mule's eyes flickered with that golden light. Old Pete had noticed, just for a moment, but long enough for those closest to see it. What in the hell? Hayes stammered, his face pale. Takoda looked at the chains binding the mule's legs, without being asked. Johnston, the previous owner's brother, threw him the keys. Just take it and go, he said, fear evident in his voice. Take it far from here. As Takoda unlocked the chains, each one falling with a sound like thunder, he spoke to the mule in his native tongue. "You need a name, friend. A strong name. A name that honors what you are, not what they tried to make you." He thought of the old stories, the legends his grandmother used to tell by the fire. "Mapi," he said finally. "It means sky in the old language, because like the sky, you are vast and untamed, and no man can truly own you." Mapi snorted, and Takoda could have sworn it sounded like approval. As he led the giant mule out of the pen, the crowd parted like the Red Sea. Some crossed themselves, others simply stared in awe, but one small voice broke the silence. A little girl named Mary, the minister's daughter. "Mama," she said, tugging on her mother's skirts, "that Indian's glowing. Can't you see? He's glowing just like the mule." Her mother hushed her, but several others had seen it too, a faint shimmer around Takoda, like heat waves rising from the desert, but colored with the same golden hue that had flickered in Mapi's eyes. As man and mule walked slowly through the town, heading toward the desert, old Pete took another swig from his flask and muttered to anyone who would listen, "That weren't no ordinary auction. Mark my words, we just witnessed something else. Something that's going to change everything." Behind them, unnoticed by all except young Mary, their footprints in the dust glowed faintly gold just a moment before the wind swept them away. The desert welcomed them like old enemies forced to share a drink. 3 miles outside Tombstone, Takoda's newfound strength began to waver, and Mapi stopped without being asked, lowering himself to the ground in a motion so deliberate it defied everything Takoda knew about mules. "You want me to ride?" Takoda asked, surprised. In his experience, unbroken animals didn't offer themselves as mounts. Mapi turned his massive head, fixing Takoda with one dark eye that seemed to say, "We both know you won't make it otherwise." Takoda climbed onto the mule's broad back, his hands gripping the coarse mane. The moment he settled, Mapi rose with surprising grace and began walking toward the mountains, choosing a path Takoda hadn't even seen, a narrow deer trail that wound through organ pipe cacti and ukatillo. "You know these lands," Takoda murmured. It wasn't a question. As they traveled, Takoda studied the scars covering Mapi's hide. Each one told a story. The long, jagged line across his shoulder, that was from barbed wire, probably from when someone tried to pen him in too small a space. The circular burns on his flanks, those were from branding irons, but applied multiple times, as if someone had tried to break his spirit through pain. The missing half of his ear, that looked like a bullet graze, probably from someone who'd tried to put him down and missed. "They tried to make you small," Takoda said, running his hand along a particularly vicious scar. "But you remained large. This is why they feared you." Mapi's ear flicked back, as the sun began its descent, painting the desert in shades of blood and gold. They came upon something unexpected, a hidden spring, barely more than a trickle, surrounded by a small grove of Palo Verde trees. It was invisible from any distance, tucked into a fold in the rocks that you'd never see unless you knew exactly where to look. Mapi had walked directly to it. "This is your secret place," Takoda said, sliding from the mule's back, "where you came when you escaped before, where you dreamed of freedom." He knelt by the spring and drank deeply, the water sweet and cold. Mapi drank beside him, and for a moment they were just two creatures surviving together, all pretense and strangeness set aside. But as darkness fell, the strangeness returned tenfold. Takoda built a small fire from dead mesquite branches, and as the flames danced, Mapi did something that made Takoda's blood run cold. The mule drew patterns in the sand with his hoof, deliberate, complex patterns that looked almost like writing. Takoda breathed. "You're writing." The symbols weren't Apache, nor any language Takoda recognized, but they had structure, purpose. Mapi completed the design, and then stood back, looking at Takoda expectantly. "I don't understand," Takoda said, frustrated. What are you trying to tell me? Mappy snorted and began again, this time drawing simpler shapes. A circle, then lines radiating from it like the sun. Then another circle with a crescented shadow, sun and moon, day and night. Time? Takoda guessed. You're showing me time passing. Mappy stamped once. What Takoda was beginning to understand meant yes. The mule continued drawing. Many suns and moons. Years passing. Then a figure that could only be a man on horseback, and another figure, larger, with 4 legs. The man figure fell. The 4-legged figure stood alone. Then more suns and moons. Many more. You've been alone a long time, Takoda said softly. Longer than makes sense for a mule's life. Mappy looked at him with those impossibly intelligent eyes and drew one more symbol, a question mark. He'd seen that symbol on wanted posters in town. You're asking me the same thing, Takoda realized. Why I'm alone. So Takoda told him. Speaking in a mixture of Apache and English, he told Mappy about his tribe, about the wars, about choosing peace over violence, and being cast out for it. He told him about wandering the desert, about the Mexican trader, about the strange pull he'd felt toward the auction. My grandmother used to say that some souls are too big for one lifetime, Takoda said, staring into the fire. That they return again and again, searching for something. Purpose, maybe, or redemption, or just someone who understands. Mappy moved closer to the fire, his massive form casting shadows that danced like spirits on the rocks. Then he did something that no mule should be able to do. He deliberately picked up a stick in his mouth and dragged it through the sand, creating new patterns. This time, the drawing was clearer, a mountain with something at its peak, something circular with rays coming from it. A sun, no, something else, and a path leading up the mountain, with many obstacles drawn along the way. You want to go to the mountain, Takoda said. There's something there, one stamp. Yes, something important. Another stamp, something that will explain what you are. This time Mappy didn't stamp. Instead he drew again 2 figures climbing the mountain together. Not 1, 2. You want me to come with you? Mappy stepped forward, and in a gesture so human it made Takoda's skin prickle, placed his massive head against Takoda's shoulder, not aggressive, not demanding, requesting, asking. All right, Mappy, Takoda said, his hand resting on the mule's neck. We'll go to your mountain, but first, we need supplies. Food, water, equipment. That means going back to town, or at least close to it. Mappy pulled back, his whole body tensing. He drew rapidly in the sand. Guns, violence, death. I know you fear them. They hurt you. But I know ways to get what we need without entering the town proper. There's a trading post run by a Mexican named Eduardo 5 miles north. He trades with my people sometimes, doesn't ask questions. I helped his daughter once when she was sick. He owes me a debt. Mappy considered this, then drew something else. The moon in various phases, ending with a new moon. Complete darkness. You want to go during the new moon, when it's darkest. Takoda calculated. That's 3 nights from now. 1 stamp. Yes, they spent those 3 days by the spring, recovering their strength. Takoda found edible plants, prickly pear fruit, mesquite pods, agave hearts. He roasted in the coals. Mappy, despite being a mule, ate sparingly, and showed Takoda which plants had the most nutrition, which seemed impossible, but was just another impossibility to add to the growing list. On the 2nd night, something happened that changed everything. Takoda woke to find Mappy standing rigid, staring at the eastern horizon. Following his gaze, Takoda saw lights in the distance, torches, many of them, and they were getting closer. A search party, Takoda whispered. They're looking for us. But Mappy didn't move to run. Instead, he began that low, rumbling sound in his chest. Not quite a bray, not quite a growl. The sound built and built until it became something else entirely. A resonance that Takoda felt in his bones. The torches stopped moving. Then, impossibly, they began to retreat, moving faster and faster, until they disappeared entirely. You turned them away, Takoda said, awestruck. with sound, like the old stories of the thunder being. Mappy looked at him, and in the starlight, his eyes held depths that seemed infinite. Whatever this creature was, it was no ordinary mule. Perhaps it never had been. The next day, their last at the spring, Takoda made a discovery. He'd been exploring the rocks around the water source when he found them. Cave paintings, ancient ones, far older than any Apache presence in these lands. The paintings showed a creature that could have been a horse or a mule, surrounded by human figures who seemed to be bowing to. Above the creature was that same symbol Mappy had drawn, the circular object with rays. "You've been here before," Takoda said, tracing the ancient paint with his finger. "Not just here at the spring, here in this world. These paintings are hundreds, maybe thousands of years old." Mappy stood beside him, looking at the paintings with what could only be described as recognition and sadness. "What are you, my friend?" Takoda asked. "Spirit, demon, God." Mappy drew in the sand again. This time, just one word, in English letters he must have seen on signs and buildings. Lost. That night, as they prepared to journey to Eduardo's trading post, Takoda made a decision. "Whatever you are, wherever you come from, you're not lost anymore. We found each other." Under the dark new moon, they set out across the desert. Takoda walked beside Mappy, not riding, treating him as an equal, not a beast of burden. They moved in silence, two shadows against the star-filled sky, heading toward Eduardo's trading post and the supplies they'd need for their journey to the mountain. But they weren't alone. From a ridge 2 miles away, a figure watched them through a brass telescope. The figure lowered the instrument and smiled, a cold, calculating smile. "So, the Apache has tamed the demon mule," said Silas Thornburg, bounty hunter and collector of oddities. "Mr. Winthrop will pay handsomely for such a creature. Very handsomely indeed." He turned to his men, 5 hardened killers who'd follow him to hell for the right price. "We follow them, let them get the supplies, let them think they're safe. Then we take the mule." "What about the Indian?" one of his men asked. Thornburg's smile wide. "Indians die in the desert all the time. No one asks questions." As Takoda and Mappy disappeared into the darkness, neither knew that their greatest trial was not the mountain ahead, but the evil that followed in their footsteps. The bond they'd formed would soon be tested in ways neither could imagine, but that's why fate had brought them together. Some battles can't be fought alone, some destinies require 2 souls to fulfill them, and some friendships are worth more than life itself. Eduardo's trading post squatted against the desert like a wounded animal, its adobe walls scarred by wind and time. The building stood at the crossroads of nowhere and nothing, serving the desperate, the outcast, and those who preferred their business unwitnessed. Takoda approached on foot, having left Mappy hidden in an arroyo 1/2 mile back. The mule had protested, drawing frantic warnings in the sand, but Takoda had insisted. "Your presence would raise questions we cannot answer, friend. Wait for me. If I'm not back by dawn, go to the mountain without me." Mappy had stamped twice, no, but eventually relented. Now, standing before the trading post's heavy wooden door, Takoda hesitated. Through the thick walls he could hear voices, more than there should be at this hour. Eduardo usually kept late hours precisely to avoid crowds. He pushed open the door. The conversation inside died instantly. 5 men sat around a rough table, cards scattered before them. Eduardo stood behind his counter, and Takoda immediately noticed the sweat on his brow, the tremor in his hands. Something was wrong. "Takoda," Eduardo said, his voice pitched too high. I wasn't expecting you." "Eduardo," Takoda nodded, his eyes scanning the men at the table. Rough types, all armed, all watching him with predatory interest. "I've come to trade. We're closed," one of the men said, standing slowly. He was tall, wearing a black duster despite the warmth. "Private game tonight." Takoda's instinct screamed danger, but he needed those supplies. "I helped Eduardo's daughter, Maria, when she had the fever. He owes me a debt." "Debts," the tall man said, moving closer, "are funny things. Sometimes they transfer to new owners." That's when Takoda saw it, blood on Eduardo's collar, carefully hidden but visible when he moved. These men hadn't come to play cards. "What do you want?" Takoda asked directly. The tall man smiled, revealing gold teeth. "Well, now that's interesting. Apache, aren't you? You're the one from the auction, the one who bought that demon mule." Takoda's blood ran cold, but his face remained impassive. "Word travels fast in the desert," the man continued, "especially when someone's offering $1,000 for information about a certain mule and his Indian friend." "I don't know what you're talking about." "No." The man pulled out a wanted poster, but it wasn't like any wanted poster Takoda had ever seen. It was printed on expensive paper, with precise lettering. At the top was a detailed drawing of Mapi, and below it, text that made Takoda's heart stop. Reward: $1,000 deed or a live supernatural creature. Extreme danger. Last seen with Apache, male property of the Winthrop Foundation. Return to Silas Thornburg. The Winthrop Foundation, another man chuckled. They collect oddities, weird things, things that shouldn't exist. That mule of yours, they say it's lived for over 100 years. They say it's got powers. Stories, Takoda said evenly. Desert makes people see things. Maybe. The tall man stepped closer. But $10,000 makes me a believer. So here's what's going to happen. You're going to tell us where the mule is, and maybe we let you walk out of here. Please, Takoda, Eduardo whispered. They have Maria. Just tell them. Rage flared in Takoda's chest. Using a child as leverage, there was no greater cowardice. "Where is she?" Takoda demanded. "Safe," the tall man said. "For now. But my partner, he's not a patient man. If I'm not back in an hour with good news," he shrugged. Takoda's mind raced. 5 men here, at least one more with Maria. Mapi was too far away to help. He was outnumbered, outgunned, and they had an innocent child. But then he remembered something Mapi had shown him, the resonance, the sound that had turned back the search party. "I'll make you a deal," Takoda said. "Let Eduardo and his daughter go. I'll take you to the mule myself." "Takoda, no," Eduardo protested. The tall man considered. "You'd betray your animal friend that easily." "It's not betrayal," Takoda said, moving toward the counter, subtly positioning himself. "It's survival. Besides, you'll need me. That mule won't go with anyone else. Try to take him by force, he'll kill you all. Like he killed those men before. Exactly like that. But he trusts me. I can lead him to you peacefully." The men exchanged glances. The tall one nodded slowly. "All right, Apache. But one trick, and the girl dies." "No tricks," Takoda agreed. Then, so quietly, only Eduardo could hear, he whispered in Apache, "When I stomp, cover your ears and drop." Eduardo's eyes widened slightly, but he gave an almost imperceptible nod. Takoda took a deep breath, remembering the exact pitch and resonance of Mapi's call. He'd been a singer in his tribe's ceremonies, trained from childhood to use his voice as an instrument. If Mapi could do it, perhaps. He stamped his foot. Eduardo dropped behind the counter, hands over his ears. Takoda opened his mouth and released a sound that was part war cry, part something else, something he'd learned from Mapi. The sound built from his chest, resonating through his bones, amplified by the adobe walls. The windows exploded outward. The men screamed, clutching their heads, blood trickling from their ears. 2 collapsed immediately. The tall man staggered, trying to draw his gun, but Takoda was already moving. He grabbed a knife from the counter and threw it with deadly accuracy, pinning the man's gun hand to the wooden table. The remaining 2 men fled, stumbling and disoriented, leaving their leader behind. Takoda maintained the sound for another few seconds, then let it die. In the sudden silence, he could hear distant braying. Mapi, responding to his call. "My God!" Eduardo gasped, emerging from behind the counter. "What was that?" "Something I learned from a friend." Takoda yanked the knife free, and the tall man collapsed, whimpering. "Where is Maria?" "Old mine shack." The man gasped. 2 miles north. Just one man watching her. Please, my ears. Takoda knocked him unconscious with the butt of his own gun. Eduardo, tie him up. I'll get Maria. Takoda, wait. Eduardo grabbed his arm. That sound, that power, it's not natural. What have you become? I don't know, Takoda admitted, but I know what I must do. He took what supplies he could carry, dried meat, water, ammunition, medicine, and left payment on the counter despite Eduardo's protests. Then he headed north, moving fast through the darkness. The mine shack was exactly where the tall man had said. Takoda approached silently, peering through a crack in the boards. Maria, Eduardo's 8-year-old daughter, sat tied to a chair, tears streaming down her face. A single man paced nearby, nervous, constantly checking his pocket watch. Takoda didn't use the sound this time. Instead, he used the skills his father had taught him, despite their disagreements. He moved like smoke, like shadow, entering through a broken window. The kidnapper never heard him coming. One swift strike, and the man crumpled. Maria, Takoda said softly, cutting her bonds. It's all right, you're safe now. The little girl threw her arms around his neck, sobbing. I knew you'd come. Papa always said you were special, like the heroes in the old stories. I'm no hero, little one, just a friend. As he carried her back toward the trading post, Maria whispered, I saw him, Senor Takoda. The man in the black coat who hired those bad men. He has evil eyes. He said he's going to catch your friend, the magic mule. He said horrible things about what they'd do to him. When did you see him? This morning. He came to the trading post first, asking Papa questions. When Papa wouldn't tell him anything, that's when he sent those men. Silas Thornburg. He was already here, already hunting them. When they reached the trading post, Eduardo wept with joy, crushing Maria to his chest. Takoda, I can never repay you. The debt was already paid, old friend. But I need you to do something. Take Maria and leave. Tonight, go to your brother in Tucson. These men, the ones hunting us, they won't stop. Eduardo nodded. What about you? Marpy and I have a journey to complete. That mule. What is it really? Takoda considered lying, but Eduardo deserved truth. I don't know, but I think I'm meant to find out. We both are. As he left the trading post, laden with supplies, Takoda found Marpy waiting just outside, having ignored his instructions to stay hidden. The mule's eyes were bright with concern. I'm all right, friend, Takoda said, but Marpy was already sniffing him, checking for injuries. Satisfied, the mule did something unexpected. He nuzzled Takoda's chest, a gesture of pure affection. We need to move, Takoda said, loading the supplies into improvised saddlebags. Thornburg is here. He's hunting us. Marpy's entire demeanor changed. His ears went flat, and he drew rapidly in the dirt, soldiers, many of them surrounding something. Then fire. Death. You know him, Takoda breathed. You've encountered him before. Marpy's drawing continued, showing the passage of time. The soldiers pursuing the four-legged figure across vast distances, always hunting, never stopping. How long has he been chasing you, Marpy? The mule drew numbers in the dirt. Adam 47, 35 years. Takoda stared. But that would make you, Marpy added. More numbers, 1782. You're saying you're 100 years old. One stamp. Yes. Then, Marpy drew something else. Not pictures this time, but words, struggling with the letters. Not first time. Not your first time being hunted. Or not your first time living this long. Marpy looked at him with those impossibly deep eyes and drew one more word. Both. Before Takoda could respond, a shot rang out, the bullet striking the ground inches from Marpy's hoof. Well, well, came a cultured voice from the darkness. The Apache and his immortal mule. What a touching scene. Silas Thornburg emerged from the shadows, holding a IRL with a scope that gleamed in the starlight. Behind him more men materialized, at least a dozen, all armed, all professional killers. "I've been hunting you for decades, creature," Thornburg said, addressing Mapi directly. "Through 3 states, 2 territories, and more lifetimes than any beast should have, but it ends tonight." Mapi stepped forward, positioning himself between Takoda and the hunters. That rumbling sound began building in his chest. "Oh, I wouldn't try that," Thornburg said casually. "You see, I've learned a few things over the years, including this." He pulled out a strange device, a tuning fork attached to what looked like a music box. He struck it, and it produced a tone that made both Takoda and Mapi stagger. It was like their own resonance, but inverted, cancelling out their power. "The Winthrop Foundation has resources you can't imagine," Thornburg continued. "They've been studying creatures like you for centuries. They know what you are, Mule. They know where you come from, and they know how to cage you." "What is he?" Takoda demanded, fighting through the disorienting effects of the device. Thornburg laughed. "You really don't know. You've bonded with it, gained some of its power, and you don't even know what you're dealing with." He shook his head. "Your mule friend isn't from this world, Apache. It's something far older, far stranger. The Foundation calls them wanderers, beings that slip between worlds, never dying, always searching for something they lost eons ago." Mapi made a sound Takoda had never heard before, part rage, part anguish. "Yes, you remember now, don't you?" Thornburg taunted. "The Foundation has 3 others like you. Captured, studied, dissected. They learn so much, how you can live forever, how you can share your power with chosen humans, how you can open doorways between worlds, if you remember how." "You're insane," Takoda said. "Am I? Look at yourself, Apache. You were dying 3 days ago. Now you're stronger than you've ever been. You can produce impossible sounds. You're changing, becoming like him. In a few more weeks, you won't even be fully human anymore." Takoda felt ice in his veins. Was it true? Was he losing his humanity? He looked at Mapi, and in the mule's eyes, he saw the answer, and it wasn't what Thornburg claimed. He saw friendship, love, protection. Whatever changes were happening, they weren't corruption. They were evolution. "You want to cage him?" Takoda said. "Study him. Cut him apart. The Foundation pays well for specimens. And you, Apache, you're a bonus, a human in the process of transformation. They'll pay double for the pair of you." Takoda made a decision. "Mapi," he said quietly in Apache, knowing Thornburg wouldn't understand. "Remember the mountain you showed me? Go. Go now. I'll hold them off." Mapi stamped twice. "No. This is not a request, friend. This is a warrior's choice. Go." But Mapi did something unexpected. He bit down on Takoda's shirt and, with his enormous strength, threw the Apache onto his back. Then he did something impossible. He leaped. Not a normal jump. Mapi launched himself and Takoda 30 feet into the air, over the heads of the startled hunters. The tuning fork device shrieked and shattered from the sudden surge of power. "Shoot them!" Thornburg screamed. Bullets filled the air, but Mapi was already running, moving faster than any horse Takoda had ever ridden. The desert blurred past them, and Takoda could feel it. The power Mapi was channeling, the same force that kept him alive for centuries, now propelling them at impossible speed. Behind them, Thornburg's curses faded into the distance, but Takoda knew this wasn't over. It was just beginning. As they fled into the night, heading toward the mountain that held answers, Takoda realized the truth. He and Mapi weren't just friends thrown together by chance. They were 2 pieces of the same puzzle, destined to find each other across worlds and lifetimes. And whatever waited for them on that mountain, they would face it together. They ran through the night and into the dawn, Mapi's hooves striking sparks from the stones, leaving trails of that faint golden light that faded seconds after their passing. Takoda had given up trying to understand how Mapi could run for hours without tiring, how his own body no longer craved water or rest. The transformation Thornburg had spoken of, it was real, and it was accelerating. As the sun rose, painting the Superstition Mountains in shades of copper and gold, Mapi finally slowed. They stood at the base of a massive peak that Takoda recognized from Apache legends, Weaver's Needle, though his people called it the Mountain of Singing Stone. "This is it," Takoda said, sliding from Mapi's back. "This is your mountain." Mapi was trembling, not from exhaustion, but from something else: anticipation, fear, memory. The mule began drawing in the dirt again, more complex patterns than ever before. This time Takoda recognized some of them. They were star patterns, constellations, but not as they appeared now. These were the stars, as they had been positioned hundreds, perhaps thousands of years ago. "You're showing me when," Takoda realized. "When you first came here." Mapi added more details: a circle of standing stones at the mountain's peak, figures in robes, and in the center, a doorway made of light. "A portal," Takoda breathed. "Between worlds. One stamp." Yet. Then Mapi drew something that made Takoda's heart ache: a smaller figure beside the four-legged one, passing through the portal together. But on the other side, only the four-legged figure remained. The smaller one was gone. "You lost someone," Takoda said softly. "Someone you came here with. That's why you've been searching, living all these lifetimes. You're looking for them." Mapi's eyes glistened, with what could only be tears. He drew one more symbol, a heart, broken in two. "Your mate? Your child?" Mapi couldn't answer in specifics, but his anguish was clear. Whatever he had lost, it had defined centuries of existence. "We'll find them," Takoda promised, though he had no idea how. "Or we'll find answers. Come, my friend. Let's climb." The path up the mountain was treacherous, barely visible, as if it had been deliberately hidden. Several times, they had to stop while Takoda scouted ahead, looking for routes wide enough for Mapi's bulk. But the mule seemed to know exactly where to step, which rocks would hold, which paths led forward. Halfway up, they found the first evidence that they were on the right track: cave paintings, similar to those at the spring, but far more elaborate. These showed the full story: beings of light descending from the stars, taking the forms of various earth creatures to explore this world. Some became birds, some became wolves, and one became a mule. "Why a mule?" Takoda asked. Mapi traced his hoof over specific paintings, showing humans treating mules as beasts of burden, unimportant and invisible. To hide, Takoda understood. "You chose a form no one would suspect of being special." They climbed higher, and the air grew thin. Takoda should have been struggling to breathe, but the transformation protected him. He could feel his lungs working differently, more efficiently, pulling something beyond just oxygen from the air. Near the peak they encountered their first real obstacle: a sheer cliff face, 50 feet high, with no visible path around it. "There must be another way," Takoda said, searching for handholds. But Mapi was staring at the cliff intently. He approached it and pressed his muzzle against the stone. The rock shimmered, and for a moment, Takoda could see through it, see that it was an illusion, hiding a carved stairway. "A test," Takoda said. "Only those who know the truth can pass." Together they walked through the illusory wall and climbed the hidden stairs. At the top, the mountain leveled into a plateau, and there, exactly as Mapi had drawn, stood a circle of ancient standing stones. But they weren't alone. "I knew you'd come here eventually," Thornburg said, stepping out from behind one of the stones. He wasn't alone. 20 men surrounded the circle, all armed with those strange tuning fork devices. "The Foundation has been watching this place for 50 years, waiting for one of you wanderers to return to your arrival point. How did you get here before us?" Takoda demanded. "Railroad to the eastern slope, horses to the base, and a proper trail up the back of the mountain. You took the pilgrimage route. The long way. Symbolic, I'm sure, but inefficient." Mapi stepped forward, that rumbling building in his chest again. "Don't bother," Thornburg said. "These devices are the new model. The frequency completely neutralizes your kind's ability. You're just an ordinary mule now." To prove his point, he activated his device. The tone it produced was excruciating, driving both Takoda and Mapi to their knees. But as the pain washed over him, Takoda noticed something. The standing stones were reacting, humming in harmony with the frequency. "You fool," Takoda gasped. "You don't know what you're doing." Activating the portal, Thornburg smiled. "Oh, but I do." The Foundation's scientists figured it out years ago. The right frequency at the right place, with one of you wanderers present. It opens the doorway. We're going to send you back where you came from, after we extract what we need from you, of course. The stones were glowing now, and in the center of the circle, the air began to ripple, but something was wrong. The light wasn't the pure gold Mapi had drawn. It was tinged with red, with darkness. Mapi's eyes went wide with terror. He began drawing frantically in the dirt. "Wrong door, wrong door. Danger." "What?" Thornburg frowned, noticing the mule's panic. "What do you mean, wrong door?" The portal tore open, but instead of revealing another world, it showed something else, a void, an emptiness that seemed to pull at the very fabric of reality. And from that void came sounds, screams, howls, the cries of things that should not exist. "Close to it," Takoda shouted. "You've opened a door to the void between worlds." Thornburg's confidence evaporated. "How?" "The calculations were perfect. Your frequencies are wrong. You're not opening a pathway, you're tearing a hole." Something began emerging from the portal, not a creature, but an absence of creation, a shadow that devoured light. Where it touched the ground, a stone crumbled to dust. One of Thornburg's men was too close. The shadow brushed him, and he simply ceased to exist, not even leaving dust behind. "Run!" Thornburg screamed to his men, but panic had already taken them. They fled in all directions, some falling off the cliff in their terror. The shadow thing fully emerged, standing 20 feet tall, a nightmare of unbeing. It turned toward Mapi and Takoda, and in its non-voice it spoke, not in words but in concepts that burned themselves directly into their minds. "The lost one, the searcher. You have been found." Mapi stood, no longer affected by the tuning fork devices. The presence of this thing had disrupted all technology. He positioned himself between Takoda and the shadow thing, every muscle tense. "You search for the taken one, the stolen light. We consumed her song ages ago." Mapi's anguish was a physical thing, a sound that shattered the remaining tuning forks and cracked several of the standing stones. His mate, his companion, consumed by these void dwellers. "Join her. Become nothing. End your eternal suffering." "No," Takoda said, stepping beside Mapi. "He's not alone anymore. We stand together." The shadow thing turned its attention to Takoda. "The hybrid. The bridge between. You are an abomination." "Maybe," Takoda said, feeling power building within him. Not just Mapi's power, but something uniquely his own, born from the fusion of human will and wanderer magic. "But I'm an abomination with a purpose." He began to sing, not the war cries of his people, not Mapi's resonance, but something new. A song that came from the deepest part of his transformed soul. A song of binding, of closure, of healing. The shadow thing recoiled. Impossible. The song of making. Only the first ones knew. The first one's knowledge lives in him. Takoda pointed at Mapi. "And now in me. Your time in this world is over, void spawn. Return to the nothing from whence you came." His song grew stronger, and Mapi joined him, their voices harmonizing in impossible ways. The portal began to shift, its ugly red light turning to gold. The shadow thing was being pulled back, fighting every inch. This is not over, where one door closes and another opens. The void remembers. The void hungers. The void. The portal snapped shut, cutting off its words. The standing stones crumbled to dust, their purpose finally fulfilled. The ancient site was destroyed, ensuring no one could ever accidentally open that door again. In the silence that followed, Takoda and Mapi stood alone on the mountaintop. Thornburg and his surviving men had fled, their equipment destroyed, their confidence shattered. "Your mate," Takoda said softly. "I'm sorry." Mapi drew in the dirt. "Not mate. Child. The revelation hit Takoda like a physical blow. Your child. The void things took your child. Mapi's next drawing showed the truth. A young wanderer, barely formed, curious about the portal, touching it at the wrong moment, when void things were testing the boundaries between worlds. Pulled through before Mapi could stop her. That's why you've lived so long, searched so hard. You've been looking for a way to get her back. One stamp. Yes. Then Mapi drew something else, Takoda's face, and beside it, the Apache symbol for sun. You see me as... Mapi nuzzled him gently, and in that gesture was centuries of loneliness finally ending. He hadn't found his lost child, but he'd found something else, a new family, a reason to continue. We're not done, Takoda said firmly. The void thing said where one door closes, another opens. There are other portals, other ways. We'll find her, Mapi. Even if she's been consumed by the void, we'll find a way to bring her back. Mapi looked at him with those ancient eyes, and for the first time since they'd met, Takoda saw hope there. As they began their descent from the ruined mountaintop, neither noticed the figure watching them from a distant peak. Not Thornburg, but someone else. Someone in robes that seemed to shift between existing and not existing. So, the figure said to the wind, the wanderer has found a bridge. How interesting. The eternal watchers will want to know about this. The figure vanished, leaving only a whisper on the wind. The real story is just beginning. 3 weeks had passed since the mountain. 3 weeks of running, hiding, and discovering just how changed they both were. Takoda no longer needed food in the traditional sense. Sunlight seemed to nourish him, and water was more luxury than necessity. Mapi had begun teaching him the old ways, drawing complex equations in the dirt that showed how energy moved between worlds, how time was more fluid than humans understood. They were sheltering in a box canyon near the town of Perdition when they heard the cry. It was a child's wail, desperate and frightened, echoing off the canyon walls. Without hesitation, both Takoda and Mapi rushed toward the sound. They found her at the bottom of a ravine, a Mexican girl perhaps 7 years old, her leg bent at an unnatural angle. She'd fallen while collecting herbs, her basket scattered around her. Please, she whimpered in Spanish when she saw them. Please help me. Takoda slid down to her carefully. What's your name, little one? Rosa, she gasped through tears. Rosa Morales. My papa runs the church in Perdition. I was getting medicine plants for him. People are sick, so sick. Sick? Takoda examined her leg, badly broken, possibly damaged beyond natural healing. The fever, Rosa explained. Half the town has it. Papa prays and prays, but people keep dying. Even the doctor is sick now. Takoda looked up at Mapi, who had managed to find a path down despite his size. The mule's eyes held a question. I know, Takoda said. We're supposed to stay hidden, but... Rosa's eyes widened as Mapi approached. The magic mule. Papa tells stories about you. He says you're either an angel or a demon, depending on who's talking. Mapi gently nuzzled the girl's hand, and she giggled despite her pain. Angel, she decided. Definitely an angel. Takoda made a decision. Rosa, I need you to trust me. What I'm about to do will seem strange, but it will help. He placed his hands on her broken leg and began to sing. Not loudly, just a whisper of the song he'd learned on the mountain. Golden light flowed from his palms, and Rosa gasped as her bones realigned, the tissue healing in seconds rather than months. Miracle, she breathed, moving her perfectly healed leg. You're miracle workers. We're just friends who can help, Takoda said. Now tell me about this sickness. As Rosa explained, Takoda's expression grew grave. The symptoms she described, bleeding from the eyes, crystallization of the skin, victims reporting visions of other worlds before dying. This was no natural disease. We need to get you home, Takoda said, lifting Rosa onto Mapi's back. And we need to see these sick people. You'll come to town? Rosa asked hopefully. But people say terrible things about you. They say you're wanted by the law. Sometimes, Takoda said, walking beside Mapi, doing what's right means risking what's safe. Perdition was dying, that was clear from the moment they entered the town's borders. Black cloth hung from windows, and the few people on the streets walked with the careful steps of those expecting death to take them at any moment. Father Morales, Rosa's father, was a small man with enormous faith. When he saw his daughter walking on a leg that should have been shattered, tears streamed down his weathered face. "Papa," Rosa ran to him. "They healed me. The Apache and the magic mule, they healed me." Father Morales looked at Takoda and Mapi, and instead of fear or suspicion, his face showed only gratitude. "Then perhaps God has sent you to us in our darkest hour." "Show me the sick," Takoda said simply. The church had been converted into a makeshift hospital. 30 people lay on cots, in various stages of the strange disease. Some were covered in crystalline growths that looked almost beautiful if you didn't know they were killing their hosts. Others muttered in languages that didn't exist, their eyes seeing worlds beyond this one. "It started 3 weeks ago," Father Morales explained. "The same day the mountain exploded with light." Takoda and Mapi exchanged glances, the day they'd closed the void portal. "Father," Takoda said carefully, "did anyone from your town travel to Weaver's Needle recently?" "Sir, yes, our mayor's son, William. He's an amateur archaeologist, always exploring. He came back the day before the sickness started, talking about seeing impossible things on the mountain. He was the first to fall ill." "Where is he now?" Father Morales pointed to a cot in the corner where a young man lay unconscious, his entire body now covered in the crystalline growth. But what made Takoda's blood run cold was what he saw with his transformed vision. Threads of void energy, leaking from William into the air, infecting everyone who came too close. He was touched by the void, Takoda whispered to Mapi. "When we opened the portal, some of its essence escaped. It's using him as an anchor to this world." Mapi drew quickly in the dust on the floor. "Can fix, maybe," Takoda said, "but I'll need your help, all of your power." "What are you discussing?" Father Morales asked. "Father, I need you to evacuate the church, everyone except the sick. But please, what we're about to do, it's dangerous, and some would call it witchcraft." Father Morales studied them for a long moment. "My daughter walks on a leg that was destroyed. If that's witchcraft, then perhaps God works through witches. Do what you must." As the church emptied, Takoda positioned himself at one end of the room, Mapi at the other. Between them lay 30 dying souls and one young man whose curiosity had doomed them all. "Ready, my friend?" Takoda asked. Mapi stamped once. "Yeah." They began to sing together, their voices harmonizing in ways that shouldn't be possible. The windows rattled. The crystalline growths on the victims began to resonate, humming with the frequency. William's eyes snapped open. But they were not his eyes. They were voids, empty spaces that hurt to look at. "You closed the door," a voice that wasn't William's said. "But we already had a foothold." "Then we'll remove it," Takoda said, walking toward William while maintaining the song. "This body is ours now. This town is ours. This world will be." Takoda placed his hand on William's chest, and Mapi did something extraordinary. He charged forward and touched his muzzle to William's forehead, completing a circuit between them. The song exploded into something greater, not just sound but pure creation energy, the opposite of the void's nothingness. It poured through William, burning out the darkness like fire consuming shadow. The void thing fought back, lashing out with tendrils of unbeing. One caught Takoda across the chest, and he felt part of himself simply cease to exist. Memories, experiences, pieces of his soul torn away. But he held on, pouring more power into the song. Mapi was suffering too, the void attacking him on levels beyond physical. Takoda could feel his friend's pain through their bond, feel the void, trying to erase his memories of his lost child, trying to steal even his grief. "No," Takoda snarled, "that pain is his. That love is his. You cannot have it." He reached deeper into himself, into the place where human stubbornness met wanderer magic, and found something new, not the song of making or unmaking, but the song of definition, the song that said, this is and this is not, and the boundary between them is absolute. The void thing shrieked as reality reasserted itself, as the laws of this world expelled it like a body rejecting poison. The crystalline growths on all the patients shattered simultaneously, dissolving into harmless. William convulsed once, then lay still, but his chest rose and fell with normal human breath. Takoda collapsed, blood running from his nose, his ears, his eyes. Parts of him were gone, torn away by the void's touch. He could feel the gaps in his memory, the missing pieces of his identity. But Mapi was there, supporting him, sharing his own essence to fill those gaps. Not replacing what was lost, but building bridges across the voids within him. We did it, Takoda whispered. The church doors burst open. Father Morales entered, followed by the townspeople. They stopped, stunned, at the sight of 30 people sitting up on their cots, confused but clearly healed. Miracle, someone whispered. Miracle. Others took up the cry, but not everyone was celebrating. Mayor Hoffman, William's father, pushed through the crowd. What did you do to my son? Saved him, Takoda said weakly. William's eyes fluttered open, his own eyes, brown and human and alive. Father, I had the strangest dream. There was darkness, and then singing, beautiful singing. The mayor fell to his knees beside his son's cot, weeping. Over the next hours, as Takoda recovered, the town's attitude toward them completely changed. The Apache and his mule were no longer outcasts or demons. They were heroes, healers, miracle workers. But Takoda knew they couldn't stay. We're still being hunted, he told Father Morales. Staying here puts everyone at risk. Then we'll protect you, the priest said firmly. You can't fight what's coming. There's a man named Thornburg, and an organization with resources you can't imagine. Then we'll help you run. Father Morales pulled out a map. I have colleagues in missions throughout Mexico. You could find sanctuary there. Before Takoda could respond, Rosa ran into the church. Riders coming, lots of them, with guns. Takoda's heart sank. Thornburg had found them again. But when the riders entered town, it wasn't Thornburg leading them. It was a woman, dressed in expensive clothes that seemed out of place in the frontier. She was perhaps 40, with steel-gray hair and eyes that missed nothing. I'm looking for the Apache and the Mule, she announced. The townspeople closed ranks, blocking her path to the church. They're under our protection, Mayor Hoffman said, standing tall despite his age. Whatever bounty you're after. Bounty, the woman laughed. Mr. Mayor, I'm not here to collect a bounty. I'm here to offer them employment. She pulled out a badge, not a law enforcement badge, but something else, something that made Father Morales gasp. The Order of Eternal Watchers, he whispered. I thought you were a legend. Hardly, the woman said. We're quite real, and we've been watching Miss Takoda and Mapi with great interest. She looked past the crowd to where Takoda had emerged from the church, Mapi beside him. Gentlemen, my name is Margaret Whitfield. I represent an organization far older and more powerful than the Winthrop Foundation. We've been protecting this world from things like void creatures for over 1,000 years. Why should we trust you? Takoda demanded. Because, Margaret said, we know where Mapi's child is. Mapi went absolutely still. She's not in the void, Margaret continued. She never was. The void creatures lied to you. She's alive, transformed, and imprisoned, and we know where Thornburg is taking her. What? Takoda stared. Thornburg has her? Had her for nearly 30 years. She was his first capture, though he never knew what she truly was. The Winthrop Foundation has been experimenting on her, trying to understand Wanderer physiology. They call her Specimen 1. Mapi's anguish and rage were volcanic. The ground cracked beneath his hooves, and several windows shattered. We can help you get her back, Margaret said calmly, seemingly unaffected by Mapi's display. But we need your help in return. The void door you closed was just one of dozens that Thornburg's meddling has weakened. Reality itself is becoming fragile. We need a wanderer and a bridge working with us, or this entire world could collapse into the void. A bridge? Takoda asked. That's what you are now, a bridge between species, between worlds. The first successful human wanderer hybrid in recorded history. Do you understand how precious that makes you? How dangerous? If the wrong people learned how to replicate what's happened to you. Where is she? Mapi had drawn the words in the dirt. Where is my child? Margaret pulled out a photograph. Grainy but clear enough. It showed a fortress-like building in a mountain valley. The Winthrop Foundation's primary research facility, hidden in the Colorado Rockies, heavily defended, virtually impregnable. Virtually, Takoda noted. Margaret smiled. With the Order's resources and your unique ability, we can get in, but only if we work together. Takoda looked at Mapi, seeing the desperate hope in his friend's ancient eyes. Then he looked back at the townspeople of Perdition, people they'd saved, who were now ready to protect them in return. We'll need time to think, Takoda began. There is no time, Margaret interrupted. Thornburg is already heading back to the facility. He's reported your existence to the Foundation's board. They're mobilizing everything. Private armies, corrupt government officials, even other captured wanderers they've broken to their will. Within a week, you won't be able to move without being hunted. Then we have a week, Takoda said firmly. You have 3 days, Margaret countered. After that, they're planning to move Specimen 1, your child, to a new facility in Europe. Once she's on that ship, we'll never get her back. 3 days attempt the impossible. 3 days to infiltrate an impregnable fortress and rescue a child who'd been prisoner for 30 years. Takoda felt the weight of the decision, but when he looked at Mapi, he saw there was no decision at all. They'd found each other against impossible odds. They'd survived void creatures and portal disasters. This was just one more impossible thing to attempt. All right, Takoda said. We'll work with you, but on one condition. Name it. When this is over, when we've rescued Mapi's child and stopped whatever catastrophe is coming, you let us go. No more organizations, no more being hunted or studied. We disappear, and you let us stay, disappeared. Margaret considered this. If you succeed in what we need you to do, you'll have earned that freedom 10 times over. Agreed. As they shook hands, Takoda felt the weight of destiny settling on his shoulders. But also something else. Hope. For the first time since this all began, they had allies, resources, and a real chance. Thank you, he said to the people of Perdition, for believing in us. You saved our children, Mayor Hoffman said simply. Now let us help save yours. As the sun set over the small town, preparations began. The Order of Eternal Watchers had resources, but the people of Perdition had something else. Faith in miracles, and the determination of those who'd been saved by one. The real battle was about to begin. The Colorado Rockies loomed before them like titans of stone and ice. Margaret Whitfield's team consisted of 6 Order members, each with their own strange abilities, proof that Takoda wasn't the first human to be changed by contact with otherworldly forces. There was Chen, who could phase through solid matter for seconds at a time, Sarah, whose eyes could see across dimensional boundaries, and Marcus, who carried weapons that hurt things that shouldn't be able to be hurt. But it was the 4th member who unsettled Takoda the most, a young Apache woman named Ayana. "Hello, cousin," she said in their native tongue when they met at the Order's staging camp. "You're Apache," Takoda said, surprised. "How did you?" "The Order recruited me 5 years ago, after I survived a void-touched plague that killed my entire village. The survival changed me. I can sense Wanderer energy now, feel it like heat from a fire." She approached Mapi slowly, respectfully. "He burns so bright it's almost blinding. And you," she studied Takoda, "you're becoming like him, a living star wrapped in human flesh." Mapi had been silent since learning his child's location, conserving his strength, but he acknowledged Ayana with a gentle nudge. "The fortress," Margaret said, spreading out detailed plans on a makeshift table, "was built into Mount Sorrow. Yes, that's its actual name. The Winthrop Foundation chose it for the natural barriers, and the fact that the mountain itself has unusual properties. Unusual how? Takoda asked. It dampens wanderer abilities, Sarah explained, her otherworldly eyes shifting through spectrums humans couldn't see. The mountain is laced with a mineral that acts like those tuning fork devices, but naturally occurring. It's why they could hold Specimen 1, excuse me, Marpy's child, for so long. Marpy made a low, angry sound. The main entrance is here, Margaret pointed to the plans, heavily guarded, electrified fences. Yes, they have electricity up there, stolen Tesla designs and armed patrols. But there's another way. A maintenance tunnel that leads from an abandoned mine shaft 2 miles away. Let me guess, Takoda said dryly. Also guarded, by things worse than guards. Thornburg learned from your encounter. He's stationed void-touched creatures there. Animals he's deliberately exposed to void energy to turn them into monsters. He's insane, Chan muttered. He's desperate, Margaret corrected. The Foundation's board is questioning his failures. If he doesn't produce results soon, he'll be replaced. That makes him dangerous, but also sloppy. Ayana had been studying the plans silently. Now she spoke. There's a third way. The vision paths. Everyone turned to her. I've been having dreams since we got close to the mountain. Dreams of paths that exist between spaces. Old roads that the first peoples used before the world became solid. The mountain has them. I can feel them. That's impossible, Marcus said. Vision paths are mythology. So are wanderers, Ayana replied calmly. Yet one stands before us. Marpy suddenly began drawing in the dirt, excited for the first time in days. He drew winding paths that seemed to exist between the solid lines of the mountain, paths that folded in on themselves yet somehow led forward. You know them, Takoda breathed. You've used vision paths before. One stamp. Yes. But can you use them with the mountain's dampening field? Margaret asked. Marpy drew a question mark, then pointed at Takoda and Ayana. Together, Ayana translated. He needs us to anchor him. A wanderer, a bridge, and a sensor. Together we might be able to navigate the paths, despite the mountain's interference. Margaret considered this. It's risky. If you get lost in the vision paths, we don't come back, Takoda finished. But Marpy's child has been prisoner for 30 years. How much longer does she have before the experiments destroy her? Sarah's eyes shifted, seeing something the others couldn't. She's dying. I can see her light from here. It's flickering. Maybe days left. Maybe hours. That decided it. We go tonight, Takoda said. The vision paths. The rest of us will create a distraction, Margaret said. Attack the main gate. Draw their forces. Give you the best chance. As they prepared, Ayana pulled Takoda aside. There's something else. In my dreams, I saw her, Marpy's child. She doesn't look like a mule anymore. The experiments. The torture. She's become something else. Something that might not recognize her father. We'll deal with that when we find her, Takoda said. And if she's become a monster, if she attacks. Takoda looked at Marpy, who was carefully checking the supplies they'd need. Then we remind her who she is. Family doesn't give up on family, no matter how lost they become. Night fell like a black curtain across the mountains. At exactly midnight, explosions rocked the main gate of the fortress. Margaret's distraction had begun. Alarms wailed, searchlights swept the mountainside, and armed forces mobilized. Meanwhile, at a seemingly empty stretch of cliff face, Takoda, Marpy, and Ayana stood in a triangle formation. Clear your minds, Ayana instructed. The paths respond to intention, not thought. Know where you want to go. Don't think about how to get there. She began chanting in the old language, words that predated the Apache, predated human memory. The air shimmered, and Takoda saw them, threads of light that existed in the spaces between solid matter, roads that folded reality like paper. Marpy stepped forward first, his form becoming translucent. Takoda grabbed his mane with one hand, Ayana with the other, and they stepped onto the vision path. Reality shattered and reformed around them. They were in the mountain, but not, moving through stone like it was mist, traveling distances that should take hours in mere heartbeats. But the mountain fought them, its dampening field trying to force them back into solid reality. "Hold on," Ayana shouted, though her voice sounded like it came from miles away. Takoda sang, pouring power into maintaining their coherence. Mahi's own energy blazed like a sun, pushing back against the mountain's oppression. Together, they carved their way through impossible spaces. Then suddenly, they were through. They materialized in a sterile white corridor, deep inside the fortress. Alarms were still blaring, but they were muted here, distant. "The laboratories," Ayana whispered, her face pale from the effort. "Lower level, maximum security." They moved quickly but carefully. Twice they had to duck into empty rooms as guards ran past, heading to defend the main gate. The fortress was a maze of corridors and locked doors, but Mahi seemed to know where to go, following a call only he could hear. They descended deeper, and the walls changed from white to gray to black. The temperature dropped. The very air felt wrong, tainted with void energy. "They've been experimenting with void portals," Ayana said, disgusted. "Trying to weaponize them." They reached a massive vault door marked with warnings in multiple languages. But the most chilling was the simplest, Specimen 1. "Do not interact without authorization." Mahi made a sound Takoda had never heard before. Part rage, part heartbreak. "Stand back," Takoda said. He and Mahi harmonized again, their combined song vibrating at exactly the frequency to shatter the door's locking mechanism. The vault door swung open, revealing a sight that would haunt Takoda forever. The room was vast, filled with machinery that hummed with unnatural energy. In the center, suspended in a cage of electrical fields and void-touched restraints, was a creature that defied description. It had been a young wanderer once, in mule form, like her father, but 30 years of experimentation had twisted her into something else. She was partially shifted between forms, parts of her solid, parts existing in other dimensions simultaneously. Her body flickered between states of being, and her eyes held madness and pain beyond measure. "My God," Ayana breathed. "What have they done?" Mapi rushed forward, but the electrical fields repelled him. He called to his child in the wordless language of wanderers, a sound that transcended physical reality. The creature's head snapped up, focusing on Mapi. For a moment, recognition flickered in those tortured eyes. Then she screamed, a sound that shattered every piece of glass in the room and brought Takoda and Ayana to their knees. "Father?" The word came not from her mouth, but from everywhere at once, reality bending around the question. "Father, why did you leave me? Why did you let them take me?" "We need to free her," Takoda gasped, fighting through the pain. "The controls," Ayana pointed to a console covered in switches and dials. "But if we just release her, she might destroy everything," finished a familiar voice. Silas Thornburg stepped into the room, flanked by a dozen guards armed with those damned tuning fork weapons, including herself. "She's been void-touched so long, exposed to dimensional instability for decades. Release her without proper preparation, and she'll explode like a bomb that tears holes between worlds." "You tortured her," Takoda snarled. "We studied her. There's a difference." "Not to her," Thornburg shrugged. "The needs of humanity outweigh the comfort of one creature. With what we've learned from her, we can defend our world against void incursions, against other wanderers who might not be as benign as your friend here." Mappa was pressing against the electrical field, ignoring the pain it caused, trying desperately to reach his child. "However," Thornburg continued, "I'm willing to make a deal." "No deals," Takoda said immediately. "Not even to save her. You see, I know the stabilization sequence. I can release her safely, return her to a form that won't destroy everything she touches. All I ask in return is that you and Mappe submit to the Foundation. Let us study you, understand how the bridge process works. Think of all the good we could do with that knowledge." Takoda looked at Mappe's child, writhing in her technological prison, then at Mape's self, who was now looking at him with desperate eyes. "You're lying," Ayana said suddenly. "I can sense it. You don't know how to stabilize her. You're just trying to buy time until reinforcements arrive." Thornburg's expression darkened. Clever little savage. The word had barely left his mouth when Mape moved. Despite the dampening field, despite the mountain's interference, he channeled every ounce of power he'd accumulated over centuries of existence and struck, not with physical force, but with pure wanderer energy, a blast that overloaded every piece of technology in the room. The lights exploded, the electrical cage flickered and died, and the guards' weapons shattered. In the darkness, Mape's child fell from her restraints. Takoda caught her, or tried to. His hands passed through her flickering form several times before finally finding purchase. She was lighter than air, heavier than mountains, existing in too many states at once. "Please," she whispered in a voice like broken glass. "Please. Hurts. Everything hurts." "We've got you," Takoda promised. "Your father's here. We're taking you home." "Home?" She laughed, a sound that made reality ripple. "Home doesn't exist. They showed me. All worlds are dying. The void is eating everything. Soon there will be nothing left but darkness and screaming and—" "Stop!" Mape had somehow formed the human word, speaking for the first time. His voice was deep, ancient, filled with love that transcended dimensions. "My child, my light, come back to me." She turned to him, and for a moment she solidified completely, a young mule, smaller than her father, with a coat that should have been golden but was now shot through with veins of void black. "Papa?" she said in wonder. "Papa, you found me?" "Always," Mape said, nuzzling her gently. "Always was looking, never stopped." Emergency lighting kicked in, bathing the room in red. Thornburg had retreated to the door, shouting for reinforcements. "We need to go," Ayana urged. "Now." "She can't travel the vision paths." Takoda realized. "She's too unstable." "Then we go through them," Mape's child said, her voice gaining strength. "Through everything, through the mountain, through the void, through reality itself, if we have to." She looked at her father with eyes that held too much knowledge. "I learned things in my cage, Papa. Terrible things, beautiful things. I know how to break the world, but maybe I also know how to save it." "The main gate's still under attack," Ayana said. "If we can reach Margaret's team—" "No," Takoda decided. "We don't run. Not anymore." He looked at Mape and his child. "Can you do it? What you're suggesting? Can you get us all out?" She flickered, her form uncertain. "I don't know. I might tear us all apart. I might scatter us across dimensions. Or I might finally do something right." She pressed against her father, drawing strength from his presence. "Hold on to each other. Whatever happens, don't let go." Thornburg had returned with 50 guards, all armed with conventional weapons since their dampening devices were destroyed. "Fire!" he screamed. "The bullets never reached them," Mape's child sang, not with her voice but with her entire being. Reality folded around them like origami, dimensions collapsing and expanding simultaneously. Takoda felt himself stretching across infinite possibilities, existing in all places and no place at once. Through it all, he held on to Mape and Ayana, their connection the only solid thing in a universe, gone fluid. Then, with a sound like creation itself sighing, they were elsewhere. They stood in the desert, miles from the fortress, under stars that seemed brighter than before. Margaret's team was there, staring in amazement. They'd been transported too, pulled from their battle to safety in an instant. "Impossible," Marcus breathed. Mape's child collapsed, her form solidifying but trembling with exhaustion. Did I do good, Pap?" "Yes," Mape said, curling his massive body around her protectively. "So good, so proud." "The fortress," Sarah said, her unique eyes seeing across distance. It's gone." They turned to look at the mountain. Where the Winthrop Foundation's fortress had been, there was now only smooth stone, as if the building had never existed. "I didn't destroy it," Mappy's child said weakly. I just moved it. Somewhere else. Somewhere empty. They're alive, but very far away. How far? Margaret asked. Another Earth. One where humans never evolved. They wanted to study other worlds. So badly. Now they can. From the inside. Despite everything, Takoda laughed. There was justice in that. What do we call you? He asked Mappy's child. You need a name. She looked at him with eyes that were stabilizing, becoming more mule-like and less cosmic. Mama called me Nova, because I burned bright when I was born. Nova, Takoda repeated. Welcome to the family. As dawn broke across the desert, painting the world in gold and rose, the group stood together, human and wanderer, order and outcast. They'd done the impossible, rescued the irretrievable, and rewritten the rules of reality itself. But in the distance, storm clouds gathered that had nothing to do with weather. This isn't over, Margaret said quietly. The Foundation had other facilities, other specimens, and now they know what you're capable of. They'll come for you with everything they have. Then we'll be ready, Takoda said, his hand resting on Mappy's neck, watching Nova take her first free steps in 30 years. All of us, Ayana added, surprising him. The Order stands with you now. After what we've seen, how could we not? As the sun rose higher, Takoda felt something shifting in the world, old powers awakening, ancient alliances reforming. The rescue of Nova wasn't an ending, it was a beginning. 6 months had passed since Nova's rescue. They'd found sanctuary in a hidden valley deep in the Sangre de Cristo Mountains, a place the Order of Eternal Watchers had protected for centuries. Here, ancient energies made technological surveillance impossible, and vision paths converged like rivers meeting the sea. Nova was healing, slowly. Each day she spent with Mappy, her form stabilized a little more. She could hold her mule shape for hours now without flickering. But the nightmares, those might never fully fade. Takoda had built them a simple adobe home near a crystal-clear spring. It was peaceful here, almost paradise. Almost. You're worried, Ayana said, finding him sitting alone at dawn watching the horizon. She'd stayed with them, claiming the Order needed a permanent liaison, but Takoda suspected she stayed for other reasons. They'd grown close over the months, two Apache souls finding comfort in shared heritage and understanding. Something's coming, Takoda said. I can feel it in the transformed parts of me, like electricity before a storm. Margaret's scouts report the Foundation has gone quiet. Too quiet. They're planning something. He turned to her. How's Nova this morning? Better. She and Mappy are practicing energy manipulation. She's teaching him things she learned during her captivity, how to phase between dimensions without losing cohesion. He's teaching her how to find joy again. They walked together to the practice field, where father and daughter were indeed training. But it was Nova who was instructing, showing Mappy how to let his form become fluid without losing his essential self. Like water, Papa, she said, her young voice carrying ancient wisdom. Not like mist. Water always knows it's water, no matter what shape it takes. Mappy tried again, his massive form shimmering, becoming translucent, then solid again. Nova encouraged him with gentle nudges. She's remarkable, Ayana said. 30 years of torture, and she still has kindness in her. She has her father's heart, Takoda replied, then froze. There was someone at the valley's entrance. No, many someones. He could feel them through his enhanced senses, feel the void-touched energy some of them carry. We have company, he said quietly. Margaret Whitfield appeared on the ridge, but she wasn't alone. Behind her stood an army, Order members, but also others. Takoda recognized some faces from Perdition, including Father Morales and Rosa. There were Apache warriors from various tribes, Mexican revolutionaries, and even some former Foundation soldiers who defected. What is this? Takoda demanded. As they approached, this, Margaret said gravely, is everyone who's willing to fight for what's coming. Which is, she pulled out a leather journal, its pages filled with symbols that hurt to look at. This was recovered from a Foundation facility in London. It's Winthrop's personal notes. He's not just studying wanderers, he's trying to become one. Nova made a sound of pure horror. That's not possible. The transformation would tear a human apart unless... She stopped, her eyes widening. Unless they had a bridge to stabilize them. Unless they had you, Takoda. He's coming for me, for all of you, Margaret corrected. Winthrop himself, with an army of void-touched soldiers and enslaved wanderers. He plans to capture Takoda, use him to complete his own transformation, then open permanent portals to other worlds. He wants to build an empire across dimensions. When Mapu had formed the word with difficulty, 3 days, maybe less. His forces are already moving. Takoda looked around the valley, their paradise, their sanctuary. We could run, find another place to hide. For how long? Father Morales stepped forward. You saved my town, saved my daughter. Now evil comes for you. We will not let you face it alone. This isn't your fight, Father. Evil is always my fight, my son. Rosa, now healthy and strong, tugged on Takoda's shirt. Senor Takoda, you taught me something when you healed me. You said miracles aren't just given. Sometimes we have to fight for them. Let us fight for yours. More people spoke up, each with a story of how Takoda, Mapi, or the Order had saved them, helped them, given them hope. They'd come from across the territory, across borders, across divisions that normally kept them apart. Why? Takoda asked, overwhelmed. Why risk yourselves for us? An old Apache warrior stepped forward, someone Takoda recognized with shock. It was his father, Naicha. Because my son, Naicha, said, speaking for the first time in months, I was wrong. I cast you out for choosing peace, but I see now, you didn't choose peace. You chose a different kind of war. A war against the darkness between worlds, against those who would enslave and torture the innocent. This is a war worth fighting. They embraced, father and son, while Mapi and Nova watched with knowing eyes. We have 3 days to prepare, Margaret said. All business. We'll make our stand here in the valley. The convergence of vision paths gives us an advantage. Reality is more fluid here, more responsive to will. They spent those days in fevered preparation. Trenches were dug, weapons blessed by Father Morales and Apache medicine men alike. Nova, despite her instability, insisted on helping, teaching the human fighters how to recognize void-touched enemies. They smell wrong, she explained, like something burning in reverse. On the second night, Takoda found Mapi standing alone at the valley's highest point, looking at the stars. Scared, my friend? Takoda asked. Mapi drew in the dirt, not of dying, of losing Nova again, of losing you. We won't lose each other. We're family now, all of us. Mapi nuzzled him gently, then drew something else. Thank you. For everything. Don't talk like we're saying goodbye. But Mapi just looked at him with those ancient, knowing eyes, and Takoda felt a chill despite the warm night air. The attack came at dawn on the 3rd day. The sky itself seemed to tear open as void portals erupted across the valley's borders. Out poured nightmares, soldiers whose bodies were partially replaced with void stuff, creatures that had once been animals but were now wrong. And worst of all, 3 wanderers in chains, their eyes dead, their wills enslaved. At the center of it all stood Winthrop himself, a tall, skeletal man whose eyes burned with unholy ambition. Surrender the bridge, his voice boomed across the valley, artificially amplified. Surrender and I might let some of you live. Counteroffer, Takoda shouted back. Leave now, and we won't send you to the same dimension your fortress is in. The battle erupted. It was chaos, beautiful and terrible. Order members fought with weapons that could hurt void creatures. Apache warriors sang war songs that strengthened reality's fabric. Father Morales stood with other religious leaders, their combined faith forming barriers that void touched, couldn't cross. But they were outnumbered 3-1. Nova fought despite her instability, phasing in and out of reality to strike at enemies from unexpected angles. But each use of her power made her form flicker more violently. She's pushing too hard. Ayana warned, fighting beside Takoda. Then one of the enslaved wanderers, a massive bear form, broke through their lines, heading straight for Nova. Mapi intercepted it, and the two titans clashed with force that shook the mountain. But the bear wanderer had void claws that tore through even Mapi's transformed hide. Black blood spilled onto the ground, and Mapi staggered. Papia Nova screamed, her control shattering completely. She exploded into her unstable form, reality warping around her. Several enemy soldiers simply ceased to exist when her uncontrolled power touched them. But she was tearing herself apart too, her essence scattering across dimensions. Nova, stop. Takoda reached for her, but Ayana held him back. You'll be destroyed, Mapi, despite his wounds, began to sing. Not the war song or the healing song, but something new, a lullaby, soft and ancient, the same one he'd sung to Nova when she was newly born, 100 years ago. Nova's chaotic form paused, focusing on her father. Papa, she whimpered. Papa, I'm lost. I'm falling apart. Not lost, Mapi managed to say, each word a struggle. Found. Always found. My light, my Nova. He pressed his bloody muzzle against her flickering form and began to glow, not with his normal golden light, but with something deeper. He was giving her his essence, his centuries of accumulated power, using it to stabilize her form. No, Takoda understood what was happening. Mapi, you'll die. Mapi looked at him one last time, and in that look was all the love, gratitude and peace in the universe. Then he poured everything he was into his daughter. Nova solidified, her form becoming stable, powerful, whole, but Mapi collapsed, his massive body growing cold. Papa? Nova nudged him desperately. Papa, wake up, please. The battlefield had gone silent, even the enemies stopping to witness this moment. Takoda fell to his knees beside his friend, his brother, his teacher. Mapi, no, we were supposed to find paradise together. We were supposed to be family. Mapi's eyes flickered open one last time. With tremendous effort, he drew in the dirt. Already did. Already are. Love you both. Be free. Then the ancient wanderer, who had lived for centuries, who had searched across dimensions for his lost child, who had saved a dying Apache and been saved in return, closed his eyes and breathed his last. The sound that tore from Takoda's throat wasn't human or wanderer. It was pure grief, given voice. The mountains themselves seemed to echo it, and the sky wept sudden rain. But in his grief, Takoda found something else, rage, pure, righteous rage. He stood, power radiating from him in waves that made the air itself burn. You did this, he said to Winthrop, his voice carrying across the battlefield. You started this chain of suffering. You stole a child. You tortured the innocent. You brought war to our sanctuary. Casualties of progress, Winthrop said coldly. Now surrender, or more will die. No, the word carried power that made reality ripple. No more running, no more hiding, no more letting evil prosper, because good people are too afraid to act. Takoda began to sing, and Nova joined him, their voices harmonizing in a way that shouldn't be possible. They sang of Mapi's sacrifice, of love that transcends death, of bonds that cannot be broken even by the void itself. The enslaved wanderers began to wake up. Mapi's sacrifice having weakened their chains, they turned on their captors with centuries of suppressed rage. The void-touched soldiers screamed as the song burned the darkness out of them, leaving them human and terrified, and Winthrop himself began to change, his attempt to become a wanderer backfiring as Takoda's bridge energy, fueled by grief and love, overwhelmed his stolen transformation. He aged rapidly, his body unable to handle the forces he'd tried to control. Impossible, he gasped, falling to his knees. No, Takoda said, walking toward him. Inevitable. You tried to take by force what can only be given freely. You tried to become something without understanding what it truly means to transform. Winthrop crumbled to dust, his ambitions dying with him. The remaining enemies fled or surrendered. The battle was over. But the cost, they buried Mapi at the valley's highest point, where he'd love to watch the stars. The entire assembly, human, wanderer, and everything in between, attended. Father Morales spoke of sacrifice and love. Naisha sang the Apache death song. Nova stood silent, tears streaming down her face. "He saved me," she whispered to Takoda. "Twice. He never stopped looking for me, and when he found me, he gave everything to make me whole." "That's what fathers do," Takoda said, pulling her close. "That's what family does." As the sun set, something extraordinary happened. Where Mapi's tears had fallen when he first reunited with Nova, golden flowers began to bloom. Impossible flowers that shouldn't exist in this world. "Bridge flowers," Margaret said, in wonder. "They only grow where a wanderer has chosen to die for love." They're gateways, small ones letting beauty from other worlds bleed through. Over the following days, more flowers grew until Mapi's grave was surrounded by a garden of golden light. Nova took to sleeping there, drawing comfort from the connection to her father. And sometimes in the early morning light, Takoda swore he could see a shimmer in the air. Mapi's spirit, watching over them still. "What will you do now?" Iana asked him one evening, as they stood in the garden. What Mapi wanted: be free. Raise Nova, protect this valley, build the paradise we dreamed of. He took her hand. "If you'll have us. Nova needs a mother figure, and I need someone who understands both sides of what I've become." She smiled. "I thought you'd never ask." Nova appeared beside them in her mule form, but smaller now, younger looking somehow. The stability Mapi had given her had also given her the chance to truly be young for the first time in decades. "Are we staying here?" she asked hopefully. "All of us? Together?" "Yes," Takoda promised. "This is home now." As the stars came out, Takoda felt a warmth in his chest, the piece of Mapi's essence that lived on in him, in Nova, in everyone the great wanderer had touched. They'd lost so much, but they'd gained something too, a family forged not by blood, but by choice, sacrifice and love. Apache and Mexican, human and wanderer, order members and ordinary people who'd become extraordinary. The Winthrop Foundation was broken. The void portals were sealed. The enslaved wanderers were free. And in a hidden valley in the mountains, a paradise was growing, one golden flower at a time. Years later, travelers would speak of a magical valley where an Apache bridge and a young wanderer protected the innocent, where flowers from other worlds grew, where the spirit of an ancient mule watched over all. They'd speak of miracles and wonder, of battles fought and won, of love that conquered even death itself. But for Takoda, Nova, and their growing family, it was simpler than that. They were home. They were free, and in their dreams they could still hear Mapi's voice on the wind, saying the only words that truly mattered. "Love you both, always." The letter arrived on a spring morning, carried by a young wanderer who had heard the stories and come seeking sanctuary. "Dear Takoda," it read, "my name is Sarah. You knew me as the Order member who could see across dimensions. I'm writing to tell you that I've found something, or rather, someone. In my visions of other worlds, I've seen him, Mapi. Not dead, but transformed. His sacrifice didn't destroy him, it scattered him across realities. He exists now as a guardian between worlds, preventing void incursions, protecting other lost children. He's not gone, Takoda. He's everywhere. Every time a wanderer finds their way home, every time a bridge forms between species, every time love conquers fear, he's there, and he wanted me to tell you and Nova something. He's proud of you. He's watching. And someday when your work in this world is done, you'll meet again in the spaces between stars. Until then, live, love, be free. That's all he ever wanted for you. With hope, Sarah." Takoda read the letter to Nova, now fully grown and teaching young wanderers how to control their abilities. She cried, but they were tears of joy. That night, they climbed to Mapu's garden together. The golden flowers glowed brighter than ever, and in their light, just for a moment, they saw him translucent, shimmering, but unmistakably Mapu. He stamped once, their old signal for yes, and then faded, but his presence remained, warming the air, blessing the garden, protecting his family. "Thank you," Takoda whispered to the stars. "Thank you for finding me when I was lost. Thank you for showing me what family really means." The wind carried his words away, and somewhere between dimensions, across the vast expanse of existence, a spirit that had once been a giant mule heard them and was content. The Apache and the mule had both found their paradise, not in a place, but in each other, not in perfection, but in love. And that, in the end, was the greatest miracle of all.